Engines make fire when they're on.
This is news to me. Nobody told me
Yes,
that.
engines
I thought it just compressed the gasoline and shot it out the tailpipe.
But it makes fire in the process. And not only that, there is an explosion. Who would drive in an automobile that is exploding over and over and over again? No, obviously not. This is why we need steam cars.
External combustion for the win.
Of course.
Jim, I have a question for you. What impact does the firing order have on a V8 engine?
It can be really significant or totally unimportant.
Jim Hall knows it, oh, or so he thinks.
Welcome to Jim Hall Knows It All right here on the Automotive Esoterica YouTube channel. Of course, I am journalist Craig Cole, and as you may have guessed, this is Jim Hall. He's worked in automotive media, he's been an analyst, he owns a fleet of classic cars, and he's one of the smartest people I have ever met. So Jim, it is great to be working with you once again. It's been too long, really.
It has. I had to be working in between.
That's what you do between fun, is work. It's the job, right?
The job is fun.
Okay, well, that's a job that I've never had then. But anyway, V8 firing orders. Yeah. What is the story? What is a firing order, for starters?
The firing order on an engine is the sequence in which the spark plugs are ignited, and it's dependent upon the piston in the engine going up and down, and it has to ignite when the piston is at the highest throw at the top of its travel, because the piston is moving up and down. The order is the sequence in which you fire. For example, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the cylinders, or you could do any other number. The number is less important than making sure the crankshaft, everything works.
Stays together.
Correct.
Yeah. So sort of the impetus for this episode of the show, if you will, is I was doing some research for a story I was putting together, and the Ford 5-liter Coyote V8, as used in the Mustang, has the same firing order as the flathead V8 that you would have from, the 1930s or 40s. It's 15486372.
Yep.
And I'm cross-referencing some things. I'm pulling up stats for the F-150, which of course also offers...
Same engine on paper.
Basically the same engine. Some tuning differences, of course, for the exhaust manifolds and camshafts, but fundamentally the same engine. And I was looking at the spec sheet, and the firing order was different.
Yep.
And I was like, sure, this must be a typo in Ford specs. So I went back to the next model year. I went to the preceding model year, and again, it was the same. And the firing order for the truck is actually 13726548. Why is it different?
There are a couple of things that happen with firing order. One, the exhaust pulses are coming out in a different sequence in the exhaust system. Now, on paper, that seems, well, you're making a muffler for the exhaust doesn't make any difference. But with engines that have two exhausts, sometimes you'll do a cross pipe between the two exhausts to cross-flow it. Now, this is without catalytic converters because they would simply be upstream of this. So they first would go through the catalyst and then out. The sequence makes the engine sound different.
Okay.
They have different firing orders sound different. Ford has used the Coyote firing order on some of their performance engines of the past.
Okay, such as?
289 high performance, 302 Boss engines have that firing order. So it's one of those things, they're doing it. And at one time, I thought it was for sound alone.
Okay.
It's not. The thing is, with your firing order, you can affect functionally the torque of the engine because of when the exhaust pulses come out and the nature of the exhaust system.
Okay.
Stop and think about it. A performance engine is about power. That's just getting the engine to spin and make it go.
Because really an engine only makes torque, and horsepower is a function of that.
Correct.
And RPM.
But torque is also the force at which the piston is pushed down to turn the crank. Because of that, you can tweak your torque output with firing order.
Interesting.
And a performance car wants to rev, a pickup truck, not so much. It doesn't make that much difference.
Yeah.
So with a pickup, torque's more important. And you might find they use this firing order on some non-truck engines in the past because they were going in very large, heavy, full-size cars. So that's one of the reasons you can tweak the firing order. And it's why in one company you might find what appears to be a schizophrenic behavior with firing order. Because it does seem odd. Why simply just standardize it? And, you can't even standardize the numbers themselves.
No, because different companies number the cylinders differently, right?
Exactly. On some cars, they number right to left, and on some they go back to front.
Yeah.
It's like, so then if you find a firing order for another company car, like, for example, a Mopar 340, you've got to get the firing order, you got to get the numbers right, then you have to go through the firing order and figure out what that is for the other engine.
Exactly.
So comparison becomes a weird sort of amusing math puzzle. But even with those guys, the companies do it differently. GM has a different numbering system than Mopar does. They're all V8 engines. They all work the same way.
They're all taking different paths to get to the same destination. And it's interesting to see those differences.
But ultimately, the two things that are most noticeable to me is, one, you have some engines that will make more torque with a certain firing order than another, and the other one is some engines just sound better.
Okay.
And, you know, the truth is the Ford Performance V8s, the Coyote's one of them, the Voodoo is also one, but the Voodoo has other things going on with it.
That's the 5.2 with the flat plane crank.
flat plane
you had in
crank.
The Shelby Mustang, the GT350, right?
350
so
was the
really
normal.
just
It
revs
revs
to
like
the
a
moon.
son of a gun. That flat plane crank is a crank that allows the engine to turn at higher rates because it's lower mass, and it's also usually more fragile, but that's another story. Those engines sound phenomenally good. They to me are the gold standard of V8 engines, and this is hard for me to say, but they are the gold standard.
You're something of a GM enthusiast.
I
You
am,
have
and
several General Motors classic cars.
I have a really amazing 1966 Tornado, Olds Tornado, which you can't hear the firing order in it at all. That thing is
it's
silent.
yeah.
Yes. But the noise of a V8, V8s have a very distinctive sound. Just like inline sixes have a very distinctive sound. And I am personally fond of V8 noise, so anything that makes it sound good is better and better and better.
And the secret, correct me if I'm wrong, to that classic American V8 rumble is that you're firing 2 cylinders consecutively on each bank during each cycle, right?
In theory.
In
yes.
theory.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that...
So the pulses remain different. It's why some V8 engines will, there's a cross pipe is a pipe you put in to connect the 2 separate exhausts after the catalyst now. And it's done for something called exhaust scavenging to get the stuff to flow faster. Other times it's used to balance pulses.
Yeah.
But it's also why aftermarket exhausts on some V8s, you put them on and all they are is louder, but they don't sound good. They're just loud. That's something that makes Jim unhappy.
Well, a lot of things make Jim unhappy.
Well, this is true.
You mentioned the firing order can have an impact on the torque output of the engine.
Yep.
With a 5-liter V8, how big of a difference is it really?
Well, the issue with the 5-liter V8, the Coyote, is that they had a 32-valve V8 that was designed primarily for performance. You can kind of tell that. Yeah. And the other engines that it competes with in the market all have more displacement. So anything you can do to enhance torque, because displacement is another thing that always helps torque.
Always.
And as a result, to get more torque, I think they were kind of in that corner. That's what they were going to have to do. Yeah.
Everything they could to optimize that torque production for the truck application.
Right. Compared to the Chrysler engine, the comparable Chrysler engine is 700 cc's more, or to put it another way, it's about 50 cubic inches. And the same with the GM engine. The GM engines are actually bigger now. The 350s are gone.
Well, they've got the
they're
6.2 is
6.2s.
pretty much the standard, right?
Yeah,
The
so
LT family.
Yeah, so think about that. That's 1,200 cc's. That's a lot of displacement, and that's an advantage. So that engine can run at lower RPM, make more torque. They had to do it to be competitive. And the truth is, it's a good engine.
Both, they're all good engines, really.
It's hard to find a bad engine in a U.S. truck. You can do it, but it's hard to find.
Would you comment on which one is a bad engine? I can't hear you, Jim.
Pythagorean theorem.
I think that's a no then. So does the firing order, aside from torque, does it have any impact on engine longevity or smoothness, anything like that?
There could be engines where engineering another part of the powertrain made it more susceptible to damage from higher RPM or whatever. So, but in and of itself, no, it shouldn't have a major effect.
Gotcha. And then what are some of your favorite sounding V8 engines then? I mean, you mentioned a few Ford Performance offerings earlier, but...
Yeah, I've always liked the high performance 289s, the Boss 302. The Coyote engine is right now sort of a magical V8.
It's so smooth when you drive it.
Yes.
And the Coyote, it has this sort of high-pitched, almost reedy sound to my ear. It rips. There's not this deep guttural rumble from it.
No, I think that's intake noise you're hearing too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also very fond of the original Corvette LT5. That went in the first Corvette ZR1s.
Is that the quad cam?
That was the 4-cam engine that was built for General Motors by Mercury Marine. It was a great sounding engine. It really was.
They went to a marine supplier to build their engine?
Yeah, they could.
What's the story there?
Low volume. It
Low
was,
volume?
it was a company that could build, and they had a relationship with General Motors because General Motors would be selling them V8s for outboard conversion, and then they would sell them as Mercury V8 engines for inboard.
Okay.
And then they had the production capacity. GM, for doing a low volume engine, did not really want to get involved with it, and they did it with Mercury Marine. They did a heck of a good job on it. But that's one of them. I'm also very fond of the last generation, I think it was Ferrari 458 flat plane V8.
Okay.
It really rips, and the noise it made was really good.
What about the new C8 Corvette? Because they've got a couple high-performance versions of that, right?
Yeah.
The Z06, the ZL1.
Right. They have a flat plane crank in the ZL1, and it's impressive, but it's a different sound.
Yeah.
Flat plane crank engines make a different noise, and historically, the flat plane V8 engines have been low displacement because of the fragility.
Then they rev higher, right?
Right, and the fragility of the components. As they
Because you need
scale them
less
up,
mass.
right, the pistons get heavier, so suddenly it becomes, the fusible link in a lot of flat plane crank engines is the crankshaft,
Uh-huh.
which is never good.
No, that would be very bad if the crankshaft snaps or gets damaged or bent.
Well, you
That's
know
a
what
bad
would
day.
happen. It's a bad day because you'd probably put a rod through the block.
Is that a problem?
No.
Later in the show, Jim will share his esoteric pick. It'll be automotive or pop culture related. We'll see what he has decided for this go around. And also, if you have a question that you'd like us to discuss here on the show, no promises, but drop it down in the comments and we'll see what we can do with a future episode of Jim Hall Knows It All. But right now, we were talking about V8 engines, but you also wanted to touch on V10s, which honestly are pretty weird.
Well, there's an aspect. Some people would say V10s are sort of a violation of everything physics should do or shouldn't do. And there have been successful V10 engines, and there have been some that were V10 engines. but this V10's engine, there are two that come to mind to me. One is the Viper engine, which I know the Viper enthusiasts think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread and perforated toilet paper, but the truth is...
Not perforated with ventilation holes in it, but perforated for tearability.
Where do you buy your paper products?
Gordon Food Service.
Oh, okay. Well, Gordon Food Service. But with the V10 and the Viper, it was something of a lump. It was 8 liters, so it was making power from its displacement. It didn't sound especially well, and then they did dual exhaust that dumped out right by the driver in the
burn your
passenger's
legs.
ear. Well, I'm talking about the noise now.
Yeah.
I mean, an 8-cylinder would burn your legs there too. Actually, a 3-cylinder would burn your legs. But in the case of the Viper, you had something of a lump engine. The other one that I really do like is the V10 engine that was put in the Lamborghini Gallardo, the Huracan, and it also went in the Audi R8. And it is, by comparison, a completely sonorous and pleasant V10. Now, the irony is the only decent sounding inline 5 I've ever heard was also an Audi inline 5, and it was specifically the version that went in the TTRS.
I was just going to say, TTRS. That did not sound bad.
It didn't sound bad.
If you drove a Jetta, a Volkswagen Jetta of the similar era, it was a 2.5-liter 5-cylinder.
Correct.
It sounded like, I don't know, somebody had laryngitis and was trying to sing. It was just
they were
not
trying
pleasant.
to sing, but they were being accompanied by basically a handful of BBs thrown in a Cuisinart.
Well,
It was
yes,
just-
that too.
The
Just
noise
dreadful.
from it was awful. And, you know, I can imagine somebody at Volkswagen saying, why isn't the Jetta 5-cylinder selling? It's like, drive it. Just drive it. Drive it. It'll be all clear when you drive it.
Yeah.
But by comparison, the Audi, and it had a different firing order. There was a lot of differences in those engines.
One of the very good V10s, LFA, from the Lexus supercar.
Oh, the LFA was an engine that was completely magic.
We gave it the power of a supercar. Then we gave it the precision of a Lexus. And in turn, wrote a new definition of what's possible for an automobile.
He likes it, folks.
I don't like it. I
likes
love
it.
it. I love the whole LFA. It's a weird car to drive. The V10 had so little rotating mass in it that when you're driving the car and you pull up and you turn the ignition off, it stopped so fast. You were just like, that you imagined it threw a rod through the block, actually. That's the only thing that would stop a crank that fast. It just stopped. Conversely, it's one when you revved it.
It just boom.
It accelerated fast. The other thing is it sounds better than some V12 sound. in my mind, and actually a lot better than
Yeah.
some V12s.
But the LFA, that had actually a 72-degree bank angle, right? As opposed to 90 degrees, because with most V10s, you're taking a V8 that is well balanced at 90 degrees, and you're just adding 2 additional cylinders.
Or you're taking an i5
And bolting those two together, yes.
you have it. You can have that in any V you want.
Yeah.
But the way I understand it, the LFA engine, it was done for packaging.
Okay, because you're going to be narrower at 72 than 90.
Right. And there's another aspect to it. At one time, the project was looking at taking the Formula One V10 engine, because Toyota had an active Formula One program.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at taking that block architecture and building it, and it was a narrow angle. And I think that sort of set where they started it off. All I know is it is a phenomenal engine, and it's a phenomenal car. They just
Absolutely.
didn't build enough of them.
You should put one on your shopping list.
It's on my list. I
It's
have
on his bucket list,
a very
folks.
specific color. They
If
built
you need
9 of.
to donate to Jim's LFA fund,
Yes.
hit the link below. All right, in just a second, I'm going to ask Jim for his esoteric pick. But first, please make sure you like this video and do subscribe to the Automotive Esoterica YouTube channel so we can bring you more content just like this. But Jim,
Yes.
what have you got for us today?
Well, we talked about engine firing order, and I
Mm-hmm.
talked about some things that happen when engines are firing that aren't really supposed to happen, like the rod going through the side of the block.
You have mentioned that a number of times.
One of my favorite failures. And normally, once the rod goes through the block, the engine doesn't want to rev very much longer. Things start to come apart in a big way, except in one case, where a famous 440 Mopar cop motor engine shot a rod through the block, and the car continued to drive quickly away from a pursuing Pinto station wagon.
Well, that shouldn't be too hard. It's a Pinto, right?
It's from the Blues Brothers, and this Pinto was going to fly, but only after the Blues Brothers Bluesmobile did a fabulous reverse 360.
Oh no, what the was that? The motor. He's throwing a rod. Is that serious? Yep.
Iconic scene,
Yes,
and that's your pick.
that's my
Your
pick.
esoteric pick, because rods through the block. That's a 440 Mopar. Those are supposed to be fantastic engines. I really have a hard time believing they would throw a rod.
I don't either. I think it was only done for dramatic effect.
Okay.
Because that movie is, other than that, the movie is based 100% in absolute reality. It's almost a documentary in the way.
The way they break out into song randomly is just,
Well,
it's just like real life.
Don't you do that?
I'm afraid to admit I do.
And cars flying in the air under the L, police cars. That movie, as far as I'm concerned, it's a documentary.
Yeah. And that's just about a wrap for this episode of the show. Jim Hall knows it all. Thank you very much, Jim, for your time and expertise.
We're going to do it again, I hope.
I have a feeling we probably will.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're good.
If your probation officer allows it. Oh. And anyway, thank you all so much for watching out there. And if you're feeling generous, we've got a 21st century solution to an ancient problem. Yes, we have digital panhandling because we just opened a Patreon account.
Ooh.
If you feel like supporting us, you can do it there. We would be very appreciative if you did. Next up, check out a feature where we dissect the design of an iconic 1960s Lincoln, the Continental. Learn the ins and outs of this watershed vehicle by clicking somewhere. The link is probably over Jim's face right now, I'm not sure, but click that, check it out, and we'll see you next time.